From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Donald Trump issues a bracing statement drop-kicking Project 2025, a policy and staffing effort from the conservative think tank, the Heritage Foundation. Why is the former president running away from a 922-page white paper? And what does it say about the state of the presidential race and what we might expect from a second Trump term? Welcome to Potomac Watch. I'm Kate Batchelder-Odell, filling in today as your host. I'm joined by my colleagues on the Journal's editorial board, Alicia Finley and Mene Ukwe-Barua. Thanks to you both for joining me. Let's get right into it. I want to open up by reading a statement the Trump campaign put out on Tuesday. Strap yourselves in because this is not the usual pablum campaigns put out. President Trump's campaign has been very clear for over a year that Project 2025 has nothing to do with the campaign, did not speak for the campaign, and should not be associated with the campaign or the president in any way. Reports of Project 2025's demise would be greatly welcomed and should serve as notice to anyone or any group trying to misrepresent their influence with President Trump and his campaign. It will not end well for you. Okay, it will not end well for you. Meanwhile, Paul Dans, the director of Project 2025, stepped back from the Heritage Foundation on Tuesday, and the think tank appears to be winding down its work. So, Alicia, let's open up here with you, and then maybe you can describe for our listeners what on earth is going on here. Why is Donald Trump in this war of rhetoric here with a conservative think tank? What is Project 2025? How has it taken on this enormous national salience over the past couple weeks?
Well, I think for one, this Project 2025, which was compiled by many, many people, not just Kevin Roberts, the head of Heritage, but many former Trump staffers, conservatives, work at other think tanks and such. And it's really a grab bag of policies, including, for instance, eliminating the Federal Reserve and Department of Education, work requirements for food stamps. Again, some very reasonable policies, as I suggested, the latter being tying work requirements to food stamps, but others kind of outlandish, like requiring workers get paid overtime on Sundays. And the left, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, have really grabbed onto some of the more silly policies that really actually have no chance of being enacted into law or being really implemented by the Biden administration. And they've used this to go on attack and tie Donald Trump to Project 2025 and made it out seem to be some kind of insidious, goal or mission to basically take over the government and impose a Christian nationalist regime on the country. And one of the reasons they're doing that is because, well, it sounds very vague. Nobody really knows what Project 2025 is, and it's some over 900 pages, so it includes a lot of fodder. But Trump himself isn't running on any policy. He hasn't really come out. If you look at his MAGA platform that was put out during the GOP convention, there's really very little there supporting, higher tariffs, stronger border, build the wall, drill, baby, drill. There's nothing really to attack him on there. So this Project 2025 has really provided a lot of ammunition. And unfortunately, the left has been able to use it as a kind of an albatross to wrap around him.
Right. I mean, Joe Biden started that attack campaign before he dropped out of his reelection campaign. And for a while, his campaign website said that Project 2025 would, and I quote, terminate the Constitution, which is a pretty wild claim. It's hard to believe they're running with that one. But why don't we listen to some of that criticism real quick from Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris about how they've been playing Project 2025 on the trail.
They're planning another onslaught attacking civil rights in America. For example, Project 2025 calls aggressively attacking diversity, equity, and inclusion all across all aspects of American life. This extreme MAGA movement even proposes to end birthright citizenship. That's how far they've come. End birthright citizenship. Which if you're born in America, you're an American citizen. That's how extreme these guys are.
You may have seen their agenda. Part of it is called Project 2025. Now, can you believe they put that in writing? 900 pages of it. Project 2025. A plan to return America to a dark past. This represents an outright attack on our children, our families, and our future. These extremists want to take us back but we are not going back.
Now, Monet, I think it's not always politically easy to turn a think tank white paper into this, like I said, an issue of national salience. But Trump running from it pretty hard suggests maybe it is working. Do you think these Democratic attacks on Project 2025 have been effective?
I think that they have really come through with the Democratic base. I think there's a lot of Democrats in this country who have bought into the idea that Trump 2.0, a reelected Trump, is coming back with a vengeance, that he came in kind of unprepared in his first term. Obviously, being a political outsider, he didn't have decades worth of relationships built up in Washington. He didn't have governing expertise, and he didn't really have a platform to run on. But the idea now is that he spent the past 4 years in exile preparing for what he wants to do in his second term, and that at the heart of that is going to be A, unleashing vengeance on other Democrats, and B, enacting an agenda to really put MAGA into action in a way that he wasn't able to in his first term. And so this is what a lot of liberals believe, and they're trying to inspire a lot of their own voters to get energized with this narrative. And so they were trying to pin that idea onto Project 2025, which was very easy to do because the Heritage Foundation created this 900-page document with full plans for exactly what a second Trump term would look like and wanted to have this in place as a ready-to-go governing agenda for President Trump. But President Trump really values political flexibility more than anything. He's shown every signal in his candidacy thus far, running for re-election, that he wants to be able to decide in the moment what is going to resonate with voters, isn't coming in except with a few issues like immigration and trade with a very specific agenda. We saw this in his massive reduction of the Republican Party platform during the convention. That was a very long, detailed document that, as Alicia mentioned, ended up being reduced to a few very clear priorities that he's coming in with. And so I think that swing voters understand that Trump, actually even less than previous Republican presidents, doesn't really have a very detailed governing agenda, that he's coming in more as a populist movement. They're not necessarily going to buy into these criticisms from Democrats that he wants to impose every single line of this policy document, but I do think that it has broken through in a huge way among Democrats and is something that's going to motivate a lot of their most loyal supporters to get to the polls. And so it could have an impact on the race in that way.
Sure. And I think that's right, though you do have to stop and express some amusement that the left has decided to go with Trump as conservative mastermind as a strategy, given that's not exactly how his first term played out. Alicia, as we think about this and we try to discern what second Trump term might look like, how do we evaluate this episode? So one thing I'd note is that Project 2025, in addition to being a 900-page policy document that includes some good ideas, some bad ideas, and some in between, it also was a staffing effort. It was an attempt to build a Rolodex of people who could go into the Trump administration quite easily and to get the agency staffed up quickly once he gets into office. There may be some element of this separation that is merely Trump has some peak and doesn't want other people assuming that they will get a job in his administration. He wants to leave himself open to picking who he'd like for those spots. But what do you make of this episode telling us how Trump is going to govern? Because when I look at Project 2025, there are, like I said, some things that are divisive, and you could see why Trump would run from them. It mentions abortion in the document nearly 200 times. Trump has tried to run from that issue. But also there are a lot of policy proposals in there that are conservatives toiling in hedgerows, like permitting reform, ending sugar subsidies, policy expertise that Trump would need if he wanted to be an effective president in his second term. So, Alicia, how should we think about how Trump would govern based on his total cashiering of this document that has done some legwork on thinking about a second term?
Well, for one, this whole episode further reflects how fickle he is about his allies. And I think the Trump campaign officials put out a statement on Tuesday saying, quote unquote, reports of Project 2025 demise would be greatly welcomed and should serve as a notice to anyone or any group trying to misrepresent their influence with President Trump in his campaign. It just shows that the loyalty to Trump and supporting his MAGA agenda really doesn't buy you anything. You are completely politically expendable. And we saw this during his first term where he turned on advisors and others when it became politically convenient and opportunistic, or politically convenient to do so. But I think it also reflects that he really isn't tied to any policies, right? As we were discussing, his agenda really is very vague. It has some broad contours about reducing illegal immigration, making America great again, and bringing back all these manufacturing jobs. But he really doesn't care much about policy. Maybe his only two strong principles are reducing the trade deficit, which you continually hear him talk about, and not getting taken advantage of by China. And then the immigration, cracking down on illegal immigration, building the wall. So during a second term, I think it really is going to depend on who populates the administration, if he's able to bring in people who are studied and thoughtful. And again, I think in the Project 25, well, some of those people may actually end up going to work and serve in the administration, but you may end up getting a grab bag of policies as a result, some who are actually serious and want to push for tax reform. I think the Project 25 suggests reducing the tax rate to 18%. And in Donald Trump's remarks, he has supported reducing it all the way to 15%. So that's something that you may see. But you also may just see some outlandish proposals. The Project 2025 also adopts the Trump's administration's previous gadfly proposal of only counting citizens for the census. And that was blocked by the court, but he wants to go back and do that. And again, that's, in my view, not something that the Trump administration should be focusing on. It should be focusing on reviving growth, economic growth, especially since we're likely to see a recession probably within the next couple of years, just as a result of natural economic cycles. But getting back to the point, I think you're going to see a lot of a motley mix of policies being proposed by the administration by people who are more serious and others who are less so.
Well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly with more Potomac Watch. Welcome back to Potomac Watch. I'm Kate Batchelder-Odell, chatting here with my colleagues about the brouhaha over Project 2025 and the Trump campaign. Monet, we were just talking about what to think about Trump's agenda and how he would actually govern. One other element of this story, though, I do think is about winning political coalitions on the right. And the Heritage Foundation, when you look at Project 2025, I think its greatest shortcoming is that it does not propose reforms to Social Security. Our entitlement problem is driving our deficit problem. Social Security represents something like 22% of the federal budget. If you care about the national debt, there is simply no fixing it without entitlements. The document also puts less emphasis on a national defense, which is always been a core area of business for Heritage. It does mention national defense, does have a chapter on it, but it is not the animating theme of the document the way sort of cultural issues, equity issues, abortion is. It simply is not. It is not of the same tone that the Heritage Foundation put out in the 1980s, the Mandate for Leadership, as it tried to influence Ronald Reagan. So it does seem as if a brutal lesson here for the right is that proposing what needs to be done is better than trying to perhaps reverse engineer things that you think Trump will like to get him to pick up your campaign document. What do you make of this episode from that perspective?
Yeah, I think it's evident that the Heritage Foundation, in crafting Project 2025 and the related document, were following, in the sense that they were trying to read where President Trump was likely to go, the sorts of things that he would be interested in campaigning on, and working backward from there, and wanted to include proposals in their document that would be acceptable to him, rather than beginning, as think tanks historically have and ought to, with their own long-standing principles that have animated policy in the conservative movement, and putting them in front of Trump and other office holders to take from as they're able and as they're interested in doing. And so Social Security is a great example, in the sense that that is something that everyone who's in the field of research understands needs to be reformed urgently for the future fiscal health of the country. There's no way that you could be a free market economist and not understand that fact. And the job of conservative researchers should be, how can we devise a politically feasible way to make this happen. Now, obviously, President Trump has laid down markers since the beginning of his political career saying that he's not interested in doing this, and Republicans in vulnerable seats are going to shy away from campaigning on Social Security reform because they know that it's something they could be attacked for and potentially lose elections over. But that doesn't mean that a think tank should be accommodating themselves to that political reality. They should still be laying out what is the constructive plan for Social Security and other issues, and then leave it to the politicians to adapt that or to pick and choose what they think that they can actually run on and accomplish. And so hopefully this episode over Project 2025 will be an impetus to Heritage and to other think tanks to reevaluate their role and think, let's return to our fundamentals, which is devising good policies, put them out into the world for people to discuss and debate, rather than thinking that they can craftily insinuate themselves so fully into the governing platform of a politician.